I'm not suggesting he's as bad as Hitler, but it is like reading Mein Kampf in that Hitler thinks he's a great hero, and you put the book down with absolute disgust. And you do put this book down with total disgust at the self-pity, self-indulgence of this character.
It is here at last. Rejoice. After a week of steady leaks compounded by an accidental early release in Spain, Prince Harry's autobiography, Spare, is on the shelves in the UK today. Here's another short excerpt for you.
It felt good to be out of the Badger set, but even better to be across the way from Willie and Kate. I look forward to popping in all the time. Look, it's Uncle Harry. Hello, just thought I'd stop by. Holding a bottle of wine and an armful of kiddie presents, dropping to the floor and wrestling with little George. Will you stay for supper, Harold? Love to. But it didn't work out that way. They were half a football pitch away, just beyond a stone courtyard, so close that I could see their nanny pass by all the time with the pram, and I could hear their elaborate renovations. I assumed they'd have me over any minute now, any day, but day after day it didn't happen. I get it, I thought they're busy, building a family. Or maybe they don't want a third wheel. Maybe if I get married, things will be different. They both mentioned pointedly, repeatedly, how much they like Cressida.
Oh, that's very sad.
Yeah.
That's very sad.
Journalist and author Ian Wilson has read the book from cover to cover for us, and he joins us now to take us through the highlights. Andrew, good morning to you.
Good morning.
So how was it?
Well, it's an absolutely gripping book, and he thanks at the end this thing called the Moehringer Welch Memoir Academy, and J.R. Moehringer, who is the president or head of this establishment, and they've done a really wonderful job, these ghostwriters. It's like a novel because it starts with this famous conversation, which we now all know about, in which Charles and William come towards him after Prince Philip's funeral, and he feels threatened by them. They feel like mafiosi as they're coming towards him. And it turns out this conversation, which couldn't in reality possibly have happened in the cemetery in Frogmore, near the Great Mausoleum where Queen Victoria lies, but it turns out this conversation is happening in the cemetery, and Prince Charles, as he still is, leads his son towards the grave of the Duchess of Windsor, the disgraced American who divorced, who married into the royal family and is in this kind of dog's grave. It's absolutely brilliant. And then it ends up with this figure in exile, the man who disgraced the monarchy by marrying an American divorcee. You couldn't improve on it if you were writing a novel.
And does that continue throughout the book? I mean, what's the quality of the writing like? I mean, some of it has made me laugh out loud when I've heard clips from it because of...
It is. Well, I mean, the bit we've just heard, of course, shows you that it's soaked in self-pity. Anthony Powell, the famous novelist, once said all bestsellers, he was starting with Hitler's memoirs, Mein Kampf, all bestsellers rely on one ingredient, which is self-pity. And this one certainly has the best-selling ingredient of self-pity. I mean, the poor chap, who actually has a lot of friends and girlfriends and things, is sitting alone, as you've just heard, wishing he could be invited to supper with Wills and Kate, and also envying them being married and envying them having children, which is very touching, of course.
Is it touching, though, or is that ridiculous?
Both. The clever thing about the book is it's both. The other thing, which is really some of the great writers of the 20th century, like Nabokov, would have really appreciated about this book. It's written by the ghosts, and the voice it's meant to be, namely Harry, is much cleverer than the real Harry. So he's constantly having these aperçus, which are really the aperçus of the ghostwriters, such as that they're all characters in Shakespeare, for instance. I mean, he tries to read Hamlet because his father's a passionate Shakespearean. And then he finds this man who's in love with his mother and is resentful about a parent's remarriage and so on. That's too near the bone. Well, I mean, the real Prince Harry would never have been clever enough to have that thought, but they put it into his mind. In fact, of course, as you finish the story, you realize what it is. It's not Hamlet. It's Antony and Cleopatra. It's this man who was quite a good soldier, and then, in the rather unsparing phrase of Antony's friend, Enobarbus, was the triple pillar of the world transformed into a strumpet's fool. I'm not saying that the Duchess of Sussex is a strumpet, but it's about a man who's so hopelessly in love or in thrall to his partner that he's lost all sense of proportion and reality. The other woman in his life, of course, is his mother, and she comes into every page And this is Diana's revenge.
This book is Diana's revenge.
It is, because she's the villain of the book is the present queen, is Camilla. And he can't conceal his loathing of Camilla. And he puts in lots of things which I'm 95% certain are untrue, namely that Camilla was always campaigning to become the Queen of England. All the anecdotal evidence was that she was perfectly happy to remain Charles's girlfriend, and it was he who insisted that she married him in a registrar's office and divorced the husband and so on. But she emerges as a kind of Lady Macbeth figure.
So what are you?
It's so gripping, Stig. I can't tell you. I've been up all night reading it, and I should certainly reread it.
And so, do you think that it works at a different level? Then you're almost reading it as a novel rather than a tell-all, honest memoir in Harry's voice.
It is a kind of novel, and one of the really interesting things about it, I don't know if you watched the television satire show with Harry Enfield as Prince Charles, now the King, but called The Windsors. But it's terribly like that in that all the royal figures, you think it's going to be a tell-all, and that it'll change your perspective of what they're like. But in fact, it's completely stereotypical. All the pictures of the royals, whether it's Granny, who's so stiff and cold that she can't even hug you when you've just had some wonderful experience, whether it's Prince Philip being very abrupt and coming out with swear words when you don't expect it, whether it's Prince Charles dithering and quoting Shakespeare and being obsessed by the planet, they're all stereotypes, and they don't vary from the stereotypes that they appear in Harry's favourite and indeed only reading, namely tabloid newspapers.
That's the other thing that we took from James Marriott's review, is that how much does his view of the press colour this book?
Well, he's obsessed by hatred of the press, but although Prince Charles, as he is throughout the book, keeps saying, "Darling boy, don't read it," he can't stop reading it. And it's very flattering to us gutter journalists, of course, Stig, but he describes all the royal houses, how you go in and there's a table covered with, very flatteringly, all our works written in the tabloid press. And all the others walk past these piles of newspapers. He grabs at them and reads them. He can't stop reading them. And he wants to be a character. To that extent, he is just the representative of Diana on earth, not merely in his hatred of Camilla, but also in his obsession with the tabloid press. When I worked at the Evening Standard, I often used to sit in Nigel Dempster's office upstairs in the Daily Mail. And the telephone went every single morning, and it was Lady Di ringing him up with yet more either reflections on her own sorrows or tittle-tattle about the royal family. And she was, like Harry, obsessed, not only by the press, but by how they were covering her story.
That's interesting. Is there a paradox at the heart of this book? That's what we've noticed from what we've heard about it, which is he's both reluctant to be at the centre stage and angry that he's not centre enough of stage.
That's what's so extraordinary. The whole book is a creed of curse saying, why won't they leave me alone? Why am I constantly being hounded by journalists? And he then describes himself wooing the journalists in one way or another, because as his parents keep trying to tell him, or his father rather, and his stepmother, that you can't ever win if you're trying to manipulate the British press. And it's much better just to remain silent and withdraw. He could have done that. His wife could have done that. But instead, they were constantly, either by using lawyers' letters or by riding on the high bits of the wave when the press adored Meghan and Harry, which they did for most of the time, as a matter of historical fact. He wants to be Garbo-esque, saying his solitude and his children's safety and so on are so important, but he constantly returns to the backs into the limelight, as it were, because he's so envious. The other great quality of the book is envy. He's so envious from babyhood, really, of his elder brother.
So just do you like him then? It sounds to me that he's quite a complex character. That, you made some jokes about this, Andrew, but do you feel like, is he likable?
No. That's the other fascinating thing about the book. He thinks it is. I'm not suggesting he's as bad as Hitler, but it is like reading Mein Kampf, in that Hitler thinks he's a great hero, and you put the book down with absolute disgust. And you do put this book down with total disgust at the self-pity, self-indulgence of this character, who doesn't seem to realize, although he says that he's a great charity, a great supporter of charity and sufferer with the world suffering, he doesn't seem to realize what incredible privilege he's been born into, what wonderful luxury he lives in California. And at any minute, he could close down the show and just live in privacy, but he doesn't want to, of course.
But people should...
his relationship with his wife is saccharine, submissive, disgusting to read about, actually. It's quite nauseating, but he seems to think it's a beautiful love story.
But what's wrong with being really in love with your wife?
I think it's unnatural.
Well, that may say something more about you, Andrew, than it may say about Harry, sadly.
Okay.
No, it doesn't. No, I really, I know that I said that to make you splutter, but
I know you did.
But it's unnatural to go on about it, if you know what I mean. It's like those sort of people who, when you go out with them, they've been married for 20 years, and they can't stop pawing one another, or a man can't stop rubbing his wife's knee. They think it's beautiful. It isn't, actually. It's something rather embarrassing about it. Of course, you love your wife, and of course one wants to love one's wife. But I think making an advertisement of how fond you are of somebody else is a revolting thing to do, actually.
Okay, for all of that,
that's
Andrew,
one of the horrid things about this book.
But would you recommend people go and buy it?
Oh, well, they won't be able to stop themselves. They'll be like, you know, when you eat, say, a packet of popular crisps, I won't name them on the radio, but you think they're delicious. They're not really. You just can't stop eating it. And then you eat another packet, and then you feel totally sick. That's what this book is like.
Once you pop, you can't stop with Spare.
You can't stop. You can't stop.
And we'll have to stop
but
there.
You will
I think.
feel sick. You will feel totally sick at the end of it.
Well, I've been a bit on a roller coaster there. The bits of it sounded amazing, and then you've turned on it a little bit. Andrew, really interesting. Thank you for taking the time to read it. He stayed up all night. I think he quite enjoyed it. There's some harsh words there at the end, but I took a sense of enjoyment from him there as well. That's Ian Wilson.